Hi there, readers. Today we are reading Chapter 3 of The Lemonade War. And after our reading today, we'll have a few questions in a Google form to fill out, so make sure you do that. Chapter 3 starts with joint venture, and we have a definition for that. It seems to me that every chapter has a short definition that describes what the chapter is about. So let's listen closely because we might be able to predict what will happen based on our definition. Joint venture. Two or more people joining forces to sell a certain amount of goods or to work on a single project. When the goods are sold, the project is finished, the joint venture ends. Okay. Your sister is really... Shut up, said Evan. Huh? Just shut up. She's okay. She doesn't... Look, she's okay. So just shut up. Okay, said Scott, holding up his free hand to show he meant peace. Evan was getting abused on both sides. The heavy cooler was banging against his inside leg with every step, and the plastic chairs were scraping against his outside leg. Bruised and bloodied, he thought to himself, all for the fun of hanging out with Scott Spencer. Why couldn't Jack have been home, or Ryan? And why did Adam have to be on the Cape this week? It stunk. How far are we walking? Grunted Scott. Just to the corner. Evan watched as the drops of sweat fell off his face and landed on the hot sidewalk. We should have stayed in the driveway. It was shaded. The corner's better. Trust me, said Evan. He remembered when Jessie had said the same words to him last summer. They were setting up the lemonade stand together, and Evan had been grumbling about dragging the cooler across the street and down two houses, just like Scott. But Jessie had insisted, there's a sidewalk on this side, she said, so we'll get good foot traffic coming in both directions, and people in cars coming around the curve will have time to see us and slow down. Besides, there are a bunch of little kids on the side street, and their mothers won't let them cross. The corner's better. Trust me. And she was right. They'd made a ton of money that afternoon. It took 10 seconds to set up the lemonade stand. Evan unfolded the chairs and set one on each side of the cooler. Scott tilted the signs toward the street for maximum effect. Then they both sat down. Man, it is hot, said Evan. He took off his baseball cap and wiped his sweat from his face and his shirt. Then he grabbed an ice cube from the cooler and balanced it on his head and stuck his cap back on. Yeah, said Scott, I'm thirsty. He reached into the paper bag and pulled out a cup. It was one of those large red plastic cups that the vendors used at professional baseball games. Then Scott took one of the pitchers from the cooler and filled the cup to the brim with lemonade. Hey, not so much, said Evan, pouring himself a cup too, but only part way. He glugged down half his drink. Not bad, he thought, though he noticed a dead fruit fly floating on top. His mom had been battling mad fruit fly ever since the weather had turned really warm. The kitchen sink area where they kept their fruit bowl was dotted with tiny, feathery fruit fly corpses. Scott drained his cup and tossed it in on the ground. Ah, satisfied, he said. That was good. I'm going to have another. Evan reached for the trashed cup and stowed it underneath his seat. Nah, come on, Scott. You're going to drink all of our profits if you do that. He stretched his legs out and put his feet on top of the cooler. Just chill. I'm going to chill by having another cup, said Scott. There it was, that mean bite in Scott's voice. Evan's shoulders tensed up. Move your feet, said Scott. It's hot out here. Dude, you're... Evan sat up expectantly and looked down to the street. Hey, here comes our first customer. A mother pushing a double stroller came into the view. At the same time, one of the kindergartners from down the street rode her bike up, noticed the sign, and quickly pedaled back to her house. Within 5 minutes, there was a small crowd of neighborhood kids and pedestrians buying lemonade from the stand. Evan let Scott handle all the money while he took care of the pouring and the sweet talk. That's what his mother called it when a salesperson chatted her up. Trust me, she said once to Evan and Jessie, buying something is only half about getting something. The other half is all about human contact. Mrs. Trusky knew all about these things because she was a public relations consultant. She'd even written a book called 10 Bright Ideas to Light Up Your Sales for one of her clients. And Evan was like her. He was good at talking to people, even grown-ups. It was easy for him, so he kept the conversation flowing along with the lemonade. People hung around. Most of them bought a second cup before they left. Evan was so busy he didn't notice Jessie flying out of the garage on her bike and riding down the street toward town. Good riddance, he thought, but at the same time he wondered where she was going. During the lull in business, Evan walked all around the stand picking up discarded plastic cups. Scott sat in his chair, jiggling the coins in his pocket. Man, we're going to be so rich, said Scott. I bet we made $5 already. I bet we made 10. How much do you think we made? Evan shrugged. He looked at the stack of cups and used in his hand and counted the rims. 14. They'd sold 14 cups so far, and each cup of lemonade cost 50 cents. Evan heard Mrs. DeFanzio's voice in his ear. Mrs. DeFanzio had been his third-grade teacher, and she'd done everything she could to help Evan with his math. If 1 cup of lemonade sells for 50 cents and you sell 14 cups of lemonade, how much money have you made? Word problems. Evan hated word problems. And this was one impossible anyway. He was pretty sure that the right equation was 14 times 50. But how was he supposed to solve that? It was a double-digit multiplication. There was no way he could do a problem like that. We are doing 2-digit multiplication tomorrow, and on Friday we're learning our shortcut method, so we could figure out how to solve this problem very soon. Besides, some of those 14 people had bought refills, but used the same cup. How many? Evan didn't know. Still, he knew that they made a pretty good amount of money. That estimate was close enough for him. How much do you think we could make if we sold it all? Asked Scott. I don't know, said Evan. Maybe $20? That sounded high, even to him, but Evan was an optimist. Do you really think? Both boys looked in the cooler. 3 pitchers were left. They only had half a pitcher left. Or 3 pitchers were empty. They only had half a pitcher left. You were pouring the cups too full, said Scott. You should have poured less in each one. You're the one who brought the huge plastic cups. You could fit a gallon in one of those, said Evan. Besides, I wasn't going to be chintzy. They're only paying a whole $50 for it. They deserved a full cup. And anyway, we can just go home and make more. My mom has tons of cans of lemonade in the freezer. So go home and make more, said Scott. Oh, yes, your majesty. Oh, high commander, your infiniteness, why don't you go make more? 'Cause I'm chillin', said Scott, leaning back in his chair with a stupid grin on his face. Even Evan knew he was just joking, but this was exactly why he didn't like Scott. He was always thinking of himself. If they were playing knockout, Scott always came up with a new rule that helped him win. If they were doing an assignment together, Scott always figured out how to divide it so he had less work to do. The kid was a weasel, no 2 ways about it. But everyone else was out of town. Evan didn't want to spend the day alone, and Jessie was on his no-good list. And Mom called it when the dog did something he wasn't supposed to do. Evan might never play with Jessie again. Evan crossed the street and went into the house. He was so surprised to find that there was no more cans of lemonade in the freezer. Wow, there'd been so many this morning. Luckily, there was a can of grape juice in the freezer and a bottle of ginger ale in the fridge. It'll work, he thought. People just want a cold drink, even if it's not lemonade. He mixed up the grape juice at the sink, and the fruit flies were more out of control than ever. Thanks to the lemonade the boys had dribbled on the countertop. Evan swatted a couple, but most of them drifted out of reach and settled on the fruit bowl. He wished his mother believed that in chemical warfare, but for Mrs. Trusky it was all natural or all nothing. Usually nothing. When he went back outside to the lemonade stand, Evan noticed that the last pitcher was turned upside down on the cooler. "Aw, come on, Scott," he said. "What? It was hot, and you said we could always make more." "Yeah, well, we didn't have as much in the house as I thought. I've got grape juice and ginger ale." "I hate ginger ale," Scott said. "I wouldn't give you a penny for it." It turned out that a lot of people felt the same way. Business was definitely slower. That day got hotter. The sun was beating down on them so ferociously that it was easy to imagine the sidewalk cracking open and swallowing them whole. Fanning himself, Evans asked, How much money do you really think we've made? I don't know, said Scott, pushing his baseball cap down over his eyes. I mean, on a hot summer day like this, Evan said, silently adding his words, or tomorrow. If we sold 8 pitchers of lemonade, what do you think we'd make? 8 pitchers? I don't know. Scott shook his head. His baseball capped face wagged back and forth. It's too hot for math, and it's summer. Evan pulled out a red pen out of his pocket and started to write on his palm. 8 times question mark. 8 times 50? Divided by 2? Some math. That didn't seem right. Jessie would know. She'd do the math in a second. Evan capped the pen and jammed it into his pocket. I bet it's a lot, said Evan. I bet on a hot day like this we could actually make some real money in a lemonade business. Yeah, said Scott. Then we'd be rich, and I'd get an Xbox, the new one, with dual controls. I'd get an iPod, said Evan. He'd been saving up for one for over a year, but every time he had the money put away, it always just disappeared, like $10 from Grandma. She'd even written in her card, here's a little something to help you get that music thing you want. But the money was gone. He treated Paul and Ryan to slices of pizza at Townhouse. It had been fun, but now he didn't have it. That would be so great, to listen to music whenever I want, said Evan. I could tune you out, he added in his own head. They sat in silence, feeling the heat suck away every bit of their energy. Evan was hatching a plan. The heat wave was definitely supposed to last at least 5 days. If he and a friend, not Scott, set up a lemonade stand for 5 days, he'd definitely have enough money to buy an iPod. He had imagined himself wearing it as he walked to school, wearing it on the playground. Hey, Megan? Yeah, it's my iPod. Sweet, huh? Wearing it into class when the teacher droned on about fractions and percents. Nah, but it would be so cool. At least there would be one thing that would totally stink about going back to school. After 2 hours, they decided to call it quits. Sales had dropped off, fast, and then stopped altogether. Hey, did you notice something? Asked Evan, stacking the chairs. What? Said Scott. When we started the stand, most of our business came from that direction. He pointed down the street to the curve in the road. But after an hour, not one person who walked past us from that direction brought a cup. Not one. They all said, no thanks, and kept walking. Why do you think? I don't know, said Scott. Boy, you're a real go-getter, said Evan. You know that? Scott stalked himself in the chest, but Evan defended and knocked Scott's cap off. While Scott was scrambling for his hat, Evan just said, hang here for a minute, okay? He set off down the street. As soon as he rounded the curve, he knew why his business had fallen off so badly. There was Jessie and Megan Moriarty from his class. They were standing inside of a wooden booth, and their sign said it all. Lemonade, frosty, delicious. Thirst quenching. Wow, only 50 cents per cup. So they made an advertisement just like you and I did for on Monday when they are advertising a product, and they are advertising lemonade. By the looks of it, their business had been booming. Evan watched as Jessie accepted a fistful of dollar bills from a mother surrounded by kids. At that moment, Jessie looked up and saw him. Evan had a weird feeling, like he'd been caught cheating on a test. He wanted to run and hide somewhere. Instead, he froze. What would Jessie do? Evan couldn't believe it. She sneered at him. She cocked her head to the side and gave him a little, I'm so much better than you smile. And then she waved the money in her hand at him. She waved it, as if to say, look how much we've been selling. Bet you can't beat that. Evan turned on his heel and walked away. Behind him, he could hear Megan Moriarty laughing at him, clear as a bell. That's the end of chapter 3. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 4. Don't forget to go fill out that Read Aloud Google form and answer a few questions about today's reading. And I will see you tomorrow for chapter 4.